Hey friends, so welcome back to the shop. So arguably one of the most important pieces of shop furniture is your workbench. And believe it or not, it's been a full year since I built my workbench using Paul Sellers plans. So in today's video, I want to talk about all the things that I wish I had known before building my workbench. Stick around. So we've got a lot of new people on the channel since I built my Paul Sellers workbench just over a year ago. And I'll definitely link at the end to the build video for that I made. This has been an awesome workbench overall. I use it every single day that I'm in the shop. There's a few design features that I would have changed if I had known at the time that I was building it. And I'm going to share that with you today. Now, I built my workbench out of southern yellow pine. And this is just 2x4s that I purchased from the local home center. And the good news is that planing those 2x4s was very easy in comparison to planing a hardwood like oak. The unfortunate thing about the pine 2x4s is that they are taking quite a beating from just daily use. It doesn't take a lot of pounding or nailing or planing to really ding up the bench a lot. And I'm to the point now where it's probably time for me to actually go and resurface the bench. And when I do that, I'll definitely share it with you. I think the next time I build a workbench, I'm definitely going to use hardwoods for the work surface. I think that the softwoods that I use, like poplar and pine for the legs, is perfectly adequate, and I don't believe they will ever, break down on me. But the work surface will be a hardwood next time. The second thing I want to discuss is the tool well. I think it's a really nice addition to the workbench, but you got to be cautious because it really becomes a catch-all for all the things in your shop that don't have a permanent home. It really helped me to build the plane till because I was able to get the hand planes out of the tool well. But I still have all this stuff that really doesn't have a spot, like on the French cleat tool walls, that sort of gets in the way when I'm trying to do certain functions. You spent a lot of time getting the workbench flat and removing any of the twists from it. And you want to be able to use your workbench to do things like clamping up and assembly. And if you're not careful, the things in your tool well will obstruct your clamps from reaching from the bench over to the other side. A perfect example is my mallet. Both of my mallets are too tall to fit in the tool well without obstructing, these two surfaces. So if I ever build another workbench, it would be easy enough to make the tool well deeper. To make it deeper so the majority of the things that are in the tool well are below the surface of your workbench. The next thing you should think long and hard about before you build your workbench is the height. You really need to consider what you're going to use your workbench for. Most hand tool woodworkers spend the majority of their time at their workbench planing boards and making them flat. You want to make sure that your workbench is at the proper height to make it as easy as possible on you to do your hand planing. I built my workbench to be 34 inches in height, and that matches all of the other workbenches in my shop. I'm 5'10", and 34 inches is probably okay if I'm planing at the surface of the bench. You want to be able to get over the top of your plane so you can get your weight into it. But when you put a piece of material in your vise, it sets it up a couple inches. And then when you're planing, you can't get quite as much force on the plane because it's a little bit too high. So you may want to lower your bench just a little bit lower than what you actually expect your ideal planing height to be. Now that I've had the year on the workbench planing at the height of 34 inches or above, I think the next time I build a workbench for hand planing, I'll make it probably an inch or inch and a half lower. That way it'll put my plane height at the ideal 34 inches. I can tell you as far as bench heights go that everyone has an opinion on it. And I would definitely look at a lot of different sources before you make the decision on what the proper height of your bench to be. So the last thing that I knew very little about was a workbench vise. And most carpenters use their vise to hold material steady while they're hand planing. Now I went with a Wilton vise, which is a very nice vise, but it is not a flush face vise. And what I mean by that is it's offset off the surface of the bench about 2 inches. So what that means is that if you're planing something long like this board, it's held in the vise between the jaws, but you have all this material without any support. Now that can be remedied by putting a spacer back there and then putting a clamp across the board. But to be honest with you, that's a real pain to do that. And on my next workbench, I'm going to design it in such a way where I don't have to do that. So I think ideally you could have some dog holes in the apron of your workbench, and then you could use some holdfast to hold your material up against the apron of your bench. And that would make it really sturdy. Like for example, if you're going to be planing the edge of a door, you can imagine how flimsy that would be and how it would be really difficult for your vise to hold that material steady without having it squeezed up against your workbench. The next issue that I ran up against is that I didn't design my bench to be long enough to hold a large end vise. Hopefully you can see here underneath the end of the bench, I only left myself about 9 inches from the actual frame of the bench to the bench top. And to use a large vise like my Wilton, I would need at least 12.5 inches of depth underneath the bench to house that vise. And if I had known that, if I had planned for that, I could have made the bench a little bit longer on this side, and that would have left room for me to put that vise. So when you're designing your bench, be sure you know which vise you're going to use. That way you know how much length you need underneath the bench to hold that vise. So by me not knowing that, I'll probably end up having to use a smaller vise like this old Irwin that I had before I built my workbench. It will fit underneath the bench and has plenty of clearance, but it's not really the big heavy-duty vise that I would like to have on the end of my bench. So overall, this has been a really great workbench, but there is a few subtle things I didn't know, and I wanted to share those with you so that you don't make those same mistakes. So if there's some subtle things that you would change with your workbench, post those in the comments so we can all learn from one another. If this video was helpful to you and you learned something, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. If you enjoyed today's video, hit that subscribe button and be sure to hit that bell notification so you'll be notified when I make new videos. Thanks for watching, and check out these other videos for more great content.